So getting injured sucks. It's also hard when you are on a training program and you're trying to work through the pain. The problem is we don't often give our bodies enough time to heal, and sometimes it's tough to know when to go and when to slow. To give you some ideas of what the healing process involves can help you dictate what your return to activity can look like. When you first get injured, you run into the inflammation phase. You stub your toe, you break a bone, you cut your skin, whatever it is, inflammation is first step out of the gate. A lot of us are taught to try to suppress and avoid inflammation, but it actually has very important mechanistic properties that are necessary for healing to occur. So what we need to think about is stop trying to avoid and suppress inflammation, but how to appropriately manage it and speed it up. Give the body what it needs to be able to get through it as quickly as possible. See our post previously on rest, ice compression, and elevation about managing and getting through inflammation. But inflammation can take anywhere from 24, 48 hours to even a week to 2 weeks, depending on the severity of the injury. So if you stub your toe, you'll probably notice after 2 days that inflammation is going down drastically. If you break a bone, it's gonna be looking ugly for a while. So 24, 48 hours for the short side, up to 2 weeks for a longer, greater side. So that's inflammation. Most of us know about that. The second phase of healing is what we call the proliferation phase. As the name implies, that is where my body's cells are now starting to replace sort of the damaged or broken tissues. That takes a fair bit more time. You can almost think of these cells as kind of like blank canvases, so to speak. So this is your scar tissue. This is the body trying to hold itself together. The cleanup, so to speak, and inflammation has been taken care of. Now we need to lay down some framework to try to hold everything in place until new tissues can come back. So the proliferation phase can take anywhere from 4 days on the shorter side when it starts, up to 2 weeks to complete on the longer side, again, depending on the severity of the injury. So this is now kind of, like I said, the scar tissue, the blank canvas, so to speak. In the third phase, we have the remodeling. So that new tissue that goes in, now things start to change and go back to the original cells that were there. So your skin, your muscle, your bone, that's when those tissues start to then get replaced to go back to normal, so to speak. This phase can take anywhere from a month to years to happen, depending on the severity of the injury. In all of the phases, if you really want to get back to action, you need to think, what is it my body needs to get through to get it to success? So if I am depriving it of the materials necessary, that healing is going to take longer. My metaphor is, it's a construction project. If the materials don't arrive, you can't build the building. So you need everything delivered on time if you want that project to be completed on time. First and foremost is protein. Protein is the building blocks of almost everything in our body. So if you're not consuming enough protein, then it's gonna take longer to build. They're building blocks, no building. Pretty simple. The average person, to maintain and even gain lean muscle mass, should be eating approximately 1 gram of protein per pound of lean mass. So if I'm a $180, approximately 13% body fat, that's about 160 grams of protein that I need in 1 day. If I were to get injured, especially if I had a pretty severe injury, I'm looking at increasing my protein take to up to 180 to even 200 grams of protein just to make sure that I'm getting enough protein to keep my healing process moving on adequately. Number 2 is movement, but appropriate movement. Obviously, if you have broken your shin, you should not be up walking around on it. That being said, there are still things that you can do to promote motion, which is what's going to get circulation to that area. I can do self-massage, I can wiggle my toes, because even that is going to be firing all of the muscles in my shin. That's going to help promote circulation, removing that inflammation, getting blood flow in, delivering of nutrients, or as we say, the groceries, garbage out, groceries in. That's going to speed up the healing process. And then that is also important for the remodeling phase, because tissues model along lines of force. So if I am not using my bones or my muscles, then those fiber types don't align right. When I'm going through healing, or if I've had a recent muscle strain, I like to do eccentric movements with my clients, because when the muscle remodels, it kind of can come back helter-skelter. By applying a line of force, aka using the muscle, it actually pulls the fibers and helps them realign along the line of force through which it's being loaded. So during that remodeling phase, not using too much weight and jumping right back in, which is how you restart your injury, because if it's helter-skelter and you do too much too soon, you're just re-tearing your injury. But applying enough force, you can help those fibers to realign, so now you have no kinks in the chain, and now you're back off to the races. So your 3 phases of healing: inflammation, proliferative, and remodeling. Why heat, adequate nutrition, and movement are important for all of them. And if you're serious about getting back in the game, you'll keep those 3 things in mind.